there, Jody here, and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing my March and April reading wrap-up, which as you can tell, I'm super on time with. Yeah, obviously, I'm super late with this video. You know, like I said in my last reading wrap-up, I'm just never going to be on time with these reading wrap-ups on my channel because I take quite a while to put my thoughts together for my spoiler-free book reviews, which is what I do before my reading wrap-ups. And like I also said in my last reading wrap-up, I still think these reading wrap-ups are worth doing because I know not everyone is interested in a full-on review for a book, but would rather hear a brief overview of what the book is about and someone's thoughts on a book. And so now that that's all out of the way, let's get on to the books that I read in March and April. So in March, I read a total of 3 books. The first book I read, I actually started reading in February, but since I finished reading it in March, I'm counting it as a book that I read in March. And so that book is called See You Yesterday by Rachel and Solomon. See You Yesterday is about Barrett Bloom. Barrett has just recently started her first year of college. Barrett didn't have the best high school experience, so her hope is that college can be a place where she can start over and reinvent herself. But shortly after arriving at college, Barrett finds herself stuck in a time loop. Thankfully, though, she doesn't have to go through this experience alone when she meets a fellow classmate named Miles, who is also reliving the same day that she is as well. This is the second book now by Rachel and Solomon that I've read, and I am such a fan of this author's writing and storytelling. What I really connected to in this book was the story. The story deals with mental health and trauma and how someone's past experiences can really shape and mold them into the person they become. I also thought the romance in the book was very sweet, and lastly, I thought the time loop in the story was very well done and never felt repetitive. My star rating for See You Yesterday was 5 stars. So the next book that I read in March was I Need You to Read This by Jessa Maxwell. I Need You to Read This is about Alex Marks, who lives a quiet life alone in New York City. What always helped Alex get through the hard and lonely times in her life was Dear Constance, an advice column written by Frances Keene. Alex looked up immensely to Frances and felt a connection to her through her writing. Flashback to 6 months ago, when Alex finds out the devastating news that Frances Keene was killed and that the police never caught her killer. Flash forward to the present day, where the paper that Frances worked at announces that they are looking for a new writer to replace her as Dear Constance. Alex applies for the job and shortly afterwards finds out that she got it. Once Alex starts working at the paper, though, she just can't shake the feeling that something is off about the place and the people who work there, and she starts to suspect that perhaps it was someone who Frances worked with who is the one responsible for her death. I really like this mystery thriller. I thought it was very well written. I thought the story had a great main character in Alex, and I thought the whodunit storyline where the killer could be anyone was very well done. The only thing about this book that felt out of place was how the major twists and turns towards the end of the book were revealed. Towards the end of the book, there were quite a few twists and turns revealed, one right after the other in a short period of time. The way that these twists and turns were revealed was done in a very over-the-top kind of way, whereas the rest of the book was not at all written in an over-the-top kind of way, so the presentation of these twists and turns, like I said, fell out of place. Despite that, this was still a really great book, and so with all that being said, my star rating for I Need You to Read This was 4.75 stars. So the last book that I read in March was Everything We Never Knew by Julianne Hough and Goodlett. So Everything We Never Knew is about Lexi. On the night that she is receiving an award for all the accomplishments in her career, Lexi sees something odd. As she is giving her acceptance speech, in the distance she sees a man with what looks like fog around him, and then she starts to hear people screaming. But no one around Lexi sees or hears any of this. Later that night, as Lexi is making her way to go home, she learns that the man that she saw with fog around him during her acceptance speech died later that night. Lexi desperately wants to understand what it is she experienced, but she isn't sure if pursuing it is worth risking the picture-perfect life she worked so hard to build for herself. I really like this book. I thought it was very well written. I really like the story, which is about someone who has the courage to put their fears aside to find out who they are. The story also deals with spirituality and spiritual healing, and I found this part of the story to be very interesting to read about. The only thing about the book that I thought could have been better was the character development. With the exception of our main character, Lexi, all the characters are written in a one-dimensional and surface level kind of way. My star rating for Everything We Never Knew was 4.5 stars. So now for what I read in April. In April, I read a total of 2 books, but the second book I didn't finish reading until May, so because of that, I'm counting that as a book that I read in May, and so that's a book that I'll be talking about in my next reading wrap-up. So the book that I read in April was She Started by Sean Gilbert. She Started It is about Annabelle, Esther, Chloe, and Tanya, childhood friends who have continued to remain friends over the years and still find the time to be in each other's lives. One day out of the blue, all 4 are contacted by someone from their past. Poppy, an old classmate, reaches out to invite all of them to her bachelorette party on a tropical island. Annabelle, Esther, Chloe, and Tanya Could not be more confused by Poppy's invitation because none of them have seen or spoken to Poppy since their school days. Despite not at all understanding why Poppy would invite any of them to her bachelorette party, they decide to just go anyway. But once they all arrive at the island, things go on to take a turn that none of them ever saw coming. This was a very well-written mystery thriller that went at an extremely fast roller coaster-like pace that didn't stop until the whole entire story was completely over. And despite how most of the characters in the book were completely unlikable, they were still characters that were very well written and very three-dimensional, and are characters that you will remember long after reading the book. The only thing about the book that wasn't great was that all the twists and turns in the book were completely predictable. I personally didn't mind this about the book because I just thought the book itself was just so good. And so, with all that being said, my star rating for She Started It was 5 stars. So those are all the books I read in March and April. If you're curious more on what the books I talked about today are about and my thoughts on them in a more in-depth way, be sure to check out my spoiler-free book reviews for all these books on my playlist, Books I Read in 2025. So that's going to be it for today. Thank you so very much for watching. I hope I helped you discover a new book today as well. And until next time, bye.